Almost immediately after opening its runway to passenger aircraft in 1938, Runway Airport, some 10 miles south of Manchester city centre, became one of many sites of operations for the RAF throughout the Second World War. As we saw in the last video, RAF Runway was important as an aircraft assembly site for Fairey and Avro, but also became a key parachute and glider training school. Manchester Airport had started as a grassy field born out of the city's dream to have its own airport. The war had seen it develop and kept it busy, but almost as soon as peace returned, the airport was rushed back into civilian use. Today it's the third largest airport in the UK, and as we've reiterated twice already, it's huge. But in between there's a fascinating story of hope and success, a protest and disaster, a vision and foresight. And it all takes place here at this city-sized gateway from the north of England to the rest of the world. If 4 decades of off and on wartime investment had hurried along aviation innovation, taking planes from this to this within a matter of years, then there was one thing to drive its peacetime industry, and that arrived almost immediately after the Second World War had ended: mass consumerism. And in the travel industry, that was the arrival of the package holiday boom. Through the 1950s and into the 60s, airlines began offering more and more package holiday deals, many of them all-inclusive. With a lasting peace settled on the continent and the temptation of sunnier climes within reach of just a few hours journey time, Brits took to the skies and therefore the airports in greater and greater numbers, seeking sun, sea, sand and broadened horizons. Broadening horizons did, however, scare a lot of Brits in several ways. Planes were usually old and repurposed, and so airlines were forced to invest in newer jets to allay fears of flying that many people quite legitimately had. After all, it was within most people's lifetimes that planes looked like this, and anyone flying was the bravest person on the face of the earth. This of course had a profound impact on the number of passengers coming through Runway. With holidays abroad becoming more and more affordable and popular, Runway's presence was assured. In 1975 it changed its name to Manchester International Airport, and then to simply Manchester Airport in 1986 because the international bit seemed a bit redundant at this point. It's worth pointing out here that throughout this time, Manchester Council retained control of the airport, fighting off government pressure to nationalise it. This was a shrewd and brassy move, as local municipal control allowed profits from the airport to go straight to the city's coffers. Right from day one, in fact, Manchester saw the direct economic benefit of having a leading airport on its doorstep, key to the local and regional economy. Airports are the 20th century equivalent of early passenger railway stations, landmarks in a transport revolution encapsulating a specific era. But unlike railway stations, airport passenger numbers rocketed so high that very few of the original structures were kept for posterity. Old hangars and terminals, built pre and post-war, had to be swept away to make way for much larger terminal buildings. When the new terminal building opened in 1962 here, it was still the era of mid-sized propeller planes. But to cope with the new jetliners capable of carrying several hundred passengers, the airport saw more expansions, including a third pier. The tower building here was a functional yet statement building, and these photographs taken from its top, not long after construction, show us the extent of the rest of the airport by the 1960s. Including shots of the old hangar buildings and remnants of World War II era buildings. And this view looking north, showing just how rural this place still was. In 1972, a new motorway link to the nearby M56 made a direct connection not only with the city centre, but also the surrounding region, attracting passengers from further afield. A multi-storey car park was added in 1974, and you can see my point about nothing being left for posterity. Things are already looking a bit 1970s. Still, by the mid-1970s, the airport was already one, if not the most significant outside of the southeast of England, as this rather orange-looking photo from 1976 shows. One major terminal building, 3 piers, and rather a lot of green fields nearby for future expansion. A nice compact airport, not exactly setting the world on fire with its architecture, but then again, this is Manchester, not Paris. Despite the birth of package holidays, flying in the 50s and 60s was still seen through the sheen of the highbrow passenger. Flying was still very much the preserve of the well-to-do, well-dressed businessmen and glamorous ladies in big hats. But by the time the 70s had rolled in and then out again, mass consumerism had reached new heights. Package holidays now allowed less affluent people to travel abroad more regularly. Passenger numbers soared and the airport needed to keep up. Mancunians of a certain vintage will remember these huge, gorgeous Venetian chandeliers that hung in the terminal building, greeting travellers and hinting at what treasures lay beyond in foreign lands, glamorous or not. Weighing almost 2 tons each, the chandeliers originally included coloured shards of glass as part of the design, but in later years, as money was spent cleaning tobacco stains from them, it was decided to remove the coloured pieces and go all clear instead. Now there's a memory for you: tobacco stains.
Manchester Airport, the 4th of June 1967.
As flying became more commonplace, the technology got a lot safer. And it's a well-known adage that flying is the safest form of transport. But sadly, the very nature of flying means that when things go wrong, they go disastrously wrong. And Manchester Airport experienced more than its fair share of aviation disasters over the years. Of them all, 2 stand out because of the huge number of casualties involved. The first on the 4th of June 1967, when 2 of the 4 engines on an inbound Canada Air C4 Argonaut coming from Palma suddenly lost power while making a second attempt on an approach to the runway. The pilot managed to maintain enough control to crash on a tiny open area in Hope's Car, right on the edge of Stockport town centre. But sadly, 76 of the 84 people on board were killed just 6 miles from the airport. The second occurred on the 22nd of August 1985 when a Boeing 737 on its way to Corfu suffered a ruptured engine combustor during takeoff that initiated a rapid fire that spread very quickly across the rear of the plane. Despite pulling onto a taxiway within seconds of the rupture occurring and the appearance of 2 fire engines within the first couple of minutes, difficulties evacuating passengers through the fire escapes and the rapid spreading of the jet fuel fire caused the death of 55 of the 137 people on board, most of them from smoke inhalation. It was one of the worst aviation disasters in British history and sparked a new era of onboard safety guidance, particularly around fire evacuation. This amazing map produced in 1982 envisions how the airport could develop by 1990. And gives us a wonderful insight into many things that could, or indeed did, in fact, come to pass. We've got 2 zones marked here for a cargo terminal and airfield services and related development, both of which were developed in that way. These green stars indicate small areas deemed suitable for cosmetic environmental improvement schemes, and this pink diamond is the proposal of a proper public viewing point, which of course was built and is accessed today by passing the old chapel down what remains of Wilmslow Old Road. Most significantly though, you'll notice that this area here is marked down for a second passenger terminal, and over here this dotted gold line is a proposed rail link to the airport from the main line over here. The new terminal and the train station both opened in 1993. Terminal 2 was even expanded in 2019, vastly expanding the airport's carrying capacity and sprawling its footprint pretty much all the way to the motorway. In 2014, the city's tram network reached the airport, meaning you can now get on a tram in the city centre and, at the time of writing at least, stay in your seat all the way to the airport. Other notable additions include the new control tower, opened in 2013 as the airport's first standalone structure and offering unobstructed views across the whole airfield and, dare I say, much of the Cheshire Plain for miles around. And oh yeah, let's talk about the runways. When the first runway opened in 1937, it was 1,006 metres in length. It was extended in stages over the years until it reached its current length in 1981, 3,048 metres, allowing long-haul international planes to land and take off. Slightly longer at 3,200 metres is Runway 2, opened in 2001 on the very southern boundary of the site, knees up against the village of Style. This was controversial for a number of reasons, mostly because it decimated local wildlife habitats, especially around the Bollin River Valley. There were also the loss of some historical buildings, including the remains of Oversley Farm, mentioned in the last video. A rare Stone Age site that now lies below concrete forever, never to see the light of day again. A host of environmental campaigners camping in and around the site during the construction years provided a lot of publicity, including the famous activist Daniel Hooper, aka Swampy. The campaigners actually gained quite a lot of traction with the public, who sympathised with their cause. Many were from Mobberley, right next to where the new runway would end, anxious that the ancient woodland on their doorstep would be flattened forever. Police and bailiffs resorted to violence and beatings to evict protesters, only making the airport and the authorities more unpopular and delaying construction. The whole thing was an embarrassing chapter for both the airport and the police. As a result, the development of Manchester's second runway became one of the most controversial developments in recent British history and acted as a watershed moment for future airport planning. Which of course gets us thinking about how places like Manchester Airport, which are vital to the regional and national economies, are able to grow and develop and yet operate sustainably in a rapidly changing world. After all, air transport hasn't evolved very much since the development of the jet engine. Commercial aircraft are still powered by fossil fuels, meaning they're a huge and growing source of greenhouse gas emissions. And even with the development of high bypass turbofans, this engine technology is about as efficient as it can be now. And before you roll your eyes at the mere mention of the climate, remember this is actually a real problem that the air transport industry as a whole is having to address in their planning, not least airports. How do you grow an airport like Manchester and minimise the environmental footprint? Does building a new runway undermine all the good that a train and tram connection brings? Is it better to trade off green responsibilities for economic growth, or can both be had at the same time? And how sustainable is that economic plan if, as the airport's own 2030 plan notes, climate change could have some serious impacts on growth and development? Throughout its long history, Manchester Airport has continued to evolve, going from a basic grassy landing strip to a city-sized economic powerhouse, a gateway to the world. How it grows and evolves into the next 50 years depends on a number of things. How much land is readily available for expansion, the prosperity of the north, the standard of living for people in this part of the UK, how quickly air transport technology moves onto more sustainable fuel sources, and how the rest of the world opens up too. Today, more passengers fly from Manchester to Dubai than any of the aforementioned destinations, including Spanish resorts, Amsterdam and Paris. Many of these will be connecting at Dubai to get to other destinations, but Dubai itself is a top destination these days, more so than Malaga. And if you'd have suggested that 30 years ago, you'd have been laughed at. So who knows what's to come over the next 20, 50 or even 100 years for Manchester Airport? Will it keep on expanding? Will it be overshadowed by a brand new airport, a super airport, built in a better location to serve the region? Or will technology give us yet another transport revolution that we just haven't even envisioned yet? And if so, will these old fields of the once peaceful Cheshire parish of Ringway have any role to play?
Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da.